Welcome to the Lovefly podcast. Paul Tizard, fearofflying coach, and today we have Brian with us, who is a member of the Lovefly Facebook group, and today he joins us to tell us his story for the podcast. So, welcome, Brian.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Good to see you.
And you, thanks. So, for those that may or may not know you, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your story and how we've ended up talking and all the rest of it. Take your time.
Yeah, it sort of all started with me doing a bunch of searching online to try and get over my fear of flying because I needed to go to Florida to marry my best friend and his fiance. I have I don't know what you would call it. I guess it's a license to be able to marry people. And
as you do, yeah.
Yeah. So they asked me if I would marry them, and the interesting thing was they were going to get married in my hometown, and then they changed it on me and decided they wanted to get married in Florida. So that's a 4-hour, I think 4.5-hour flight from where I live. And I kind of played it off. Oh yeah, that's great. Let's do it. But inside I was having a panic attack because I haven't flown on a plane in probably 10 years, and I was pretty nervous about that. So anyway, started searching all over the internet, and I came across your podcast and Lovefly, and it really helped me out. I mean, I couldn't have done it without you and without the program.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's nice to know. So, let's rewind a bit.
For you.
Exactly, yeah. So how did the fear start? When did it start?
Yeah, so I think my fear started on my first flight. My family, we were going home to Alaska from the lower 48. We were living in Utah and needed to go up to Kodiak Island, Alaska. And part of the trip was when we got to where I think it was, Anchorage bound, we were going to have to take a boat or a plane over to Kodiak Island where our family lives. And I was really excited. I've never flown on an airplane before. I think it was probably about 12 years old. And so we drove for, I would honestly say, a couple of weeks in a truck and camper and saw all the sights. And then,
wow.
The big day came. We were going to get on a plane for the first time. And I remember showing up to the airport, not really knowing what to expect. And they started doing security checks and wanding us and putting us through, I think they were called magnetometers or things like that, looking for metal. And as a young kid, I don't think I really knew what was going on. And I asked my dad, what are we doing? And he said, well, this is to keep you safe. Bad people could get on the plane. They're trying to keep them from bringing bombs on the plane or guns on the plane. I'm not exactly sure how he explained it, but I do remember at that moment feeling very nervous. Like, this is a threatening situation. This is not the fun ride or flight that I thought it was going to be. But, we got on, the plane took off. It was really exciting. And we happened to be flying in it was a prop plane, and the wheels were underneath the wings. And I remember flying over was fine. I think it was probably like maybe an hour flight. Then we were getting ready to land, and the wheels dropped out from underneath the plane, the wings. And for some reason, I don't know if it was an optical illusion, but to me, it looked like the wings were falling off the plane.
Yeah.
And I freaked out. I started screaming. My dad was trying to, calm me down. And we landed and everything was fine. But I just remember what I thought was going to be a really fun, exciting thing turned into a very traumatic experience for me. And I never wanted to fly again. And on the way back, we didn't fly. We took a 17-hour boat ride back to the mainland to get our truck and camper. So
Is that
I
because
think
you wouldn't fly? Is that
no.
why? Yeah.
And the interesting thing was my mom wasn't a huge fan of flying, but she would do it. But my uncle, my dad's brother, would never fly on an airplane. He thought it was too dangerous. So I'm sure we talked about that, when we got over there, and they were like, Brian was afraid on the plane, and my uncle, told me he never flies. It's dangerous. It's just all of these things. And then I was like, no, I don't think I'm doing that again.
Yeah. My goodness,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and no matter what anyone tells you, that was it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess you must have been really popular saying making them
Yeah.
take a
Well,
17-hour.
it's really interesting because you talk about this a lot about how people like me really, I don't know what the wording is exactly, but I put people in situations where they have to ride in cars for long times. They had to ride on a boat for 17 hours. And it all started back then. It was the long 17-hour ride on a boat for everybody, and I still was doing it even up until this wedding. I would suggest, well, what if we, took a road trip rather than flying? Wouldn't that be a lot more fun? And we can stop at
So you
different
became
places.
quite creative, yeah, and yeah. We don't need to fly. We could. We'll miss
Yeah.
all the sights if we drive.
Yeah. People kind of put up with it for a little bit, but this trip to Florida, I think that would have been a 2-day, maybe almost 3-day drive, and nobody was willing to fall for that one.
No, funnily enough. So you had the experience when you were 12.
Yeah.
Then what happened after that in terms of cementing the fear or fighting the fear?
Well, I mean, you and I talked about this previously about an issue that I had just maybe with myself and my religion. And I believed that because I'm a gay person, I believed from what, I was being told as a kid through my religion that I was a bad person and that bad things were going to happen to me. And so I connected it somehow to this fear of flying. I mean, I had, fears of other things too, but that really strongly, I believed that I was a bad person, and I didn't deserve enjoyment. So I didn't deserve to go on fabulous vacations. And if I did, I was probably going to die in a plane crash. And so I really had some interesting thoughts that I connected this fear of flying to. And as I got older, of course, I started to realize, this isn't real. I'm not going to die in an airplane because God hates me because I'm a gay person. But it was almost too late at that point, right? I'd gone, I don't know what, 20 or 30 years, but believing that. And so I kind of had to work through some of that. And I had dealt with some of those things, but I still had the fear of flying so ingrained in me by the time I got past the whole religious issue that I had to start working on that part of it. What scared me about flying, the mechanics of the plane, and things like that. Yeah,
that's a hell of a lot to carry, isn't it? Crikey.
Yes, it was for sure.
Yeah.
So and the other interesting thing is I have family members and loved ones that fly all the time, and I'm not afraid for them to fly. I don't think it's unsafe for them to fly, but I did have this weird feeling from time to time that if anyone flew on a plane with me, their life was at risk because the plane I was flying in was going to go down. So I had some guilt there as well.
Yeah. So you were the threat.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crikey, Brian, that's a lot, isn't it? That's a lot to live with, and a lot to sort of have to sort out in your head, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Yeah. So yes, I remember the first time you told me that, it really struck me, and that's why I thought it'd be such a great podcast interview, and not to sort of like sensationalize what you just said, but just the fact that you've had to deal with so much, and you've had real strong sort of religious messages that you've had to also overcome, and you've linked that to your fear of flying and the
Yeah.
potential what might happen to you. That's a hell of a lot. I mean, a lot of people think that they're going to die in the plane crash, or and they visualize it. But you had that extra bit that you're going to be punished by God because of being gay. It's a hell of a lot that you've had to work through, mate. Crikey.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So roll forward then. What were I'm guessing you did some flights, but you said you hadn't flown for 10 years until this wedding.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously started looking into, I was desperate. I felt like I had 60 days to figure this out. And so I, started looking into, what could I do? Local therapy, were there things online? And really what I was afraid of, I guess, is I didn't really understand how a plane could fly or the mechanics of the plane. I think I probably didn't even bother to learn or figure that out because I was too worried about not getting on an airplane. But those are the things that I learned from you and learned from, other people in Lovefly and the podcast and with my pilot coach, really how a plane flew. There was an example that you or someone gave about the waves in the ocean and how it can bump the boat around, and that those waves are also air waves that can do the same thing and bump the plane around, because I just had a really hard time understanding what was bumping this plane around. And the example of another boat coming by another boat and pushing the water really, really worked for me. Then understanding that another plane near another plane could, create, bumps in the air, flying over mountains, bumps the air up, heat, whatever disturbs the air. And I just didn't really understand that before. So, turbulence was a big fear or problem of mine. I always used this analogy as a kid when people would say, well, it's more dangerous to ride in a car than it is to fly in a plane. And I would always say, but if the car breaks down, we pull off to the side of the road.
Yes.
If the plane breaks down, we have nowhere to pull over and fix it. But I also didn't realize that there's triple backup for all of the systems on the plane. Obviously, there's two engines. And so figuring all of that out and learning about that really put my mind at ease. And I started to find myself becoming less and less anxious about it once I understood what it was about, how safe things are. And also, I think you and I talked about before that it dawned on me one day that my fear was kind of outdated. We talked about how, this fear started for me probably, I would say 40 years ago. And,
Yes.
At the time there were planes that crashed, and like you talk about in your podcast, that every time a plane, had an accident, everybody learned from it. And probably that type of accident never happened again, because whatever caused it was either fixed or figured out and taken care of. And so now 40 years later, my fear of flying seems a little outdated because technology is so much better. Planes rarely crash. And it's due to exactly what you said, because every time something happened, then it was investigated and figured out.
Yeah, that's a good message to remember, that it's so safe. And I talk about that in the audio book, that it's so safe because of things that have happened. And when you think about if you crash your car tomorrow, I hope you won't, but nobody will learn anything from that. The police might investigate it. You might learn something from it, but nobody else will learn. Oh, actually, when you go into this type of bend on the road, you should apply this type of brake. None of us will learn whatever you learn. It's just lost. So that's the difference with aviation, that everything is learned. And I think that's a really helpful message. So what were you like if you did fly? I mean, did you fly, and how often?
Yeah. So I did fly prior to that last flight 10 years ago, but it was a nightmare. I was the person on the fly, I was the person on the plane that was holding the plane up by gripping the seat. I was the guy who always had to meet the pilot. I always had to tell the flight attendants that, I was a nervous flyer, and I would stare at the flight attendants the entire time to see if their face expressions
Scary.
changed. Yeah, every bing and bong on the plane, I knew it was a secret message, and
Yeah.
it was just craziness, total craziness for me to fly on a plane. I had an experience once where I flew on a 2-hour flight to San Francisco, and on the way home, I got on the plane and I turned around and I got off the plane.
Yes.
And for some reason, getting on that plane, I just couldn't do it. So I kind of got, stuck in that situation. I had other flights before that I didn't get on, and I got stuck in an airport for, 24 hours till I became so exhausted that I didn't care anymore, and I just got on the plane. It's just been a lot of, turmoil for me.
Yeah. Sounds very traumatic. And the whole sort of drama before it, then what you go through when you do it, and then you've got that bit after where you probably go, never going to do that again.
Yeah.
And what other impact has it had upon you in terms of work, all that type of stuff? And
yeah. I turned up. So my previous job, I was a photojournalist for a television news outlet, and I turned down many assignments, all over the place. My boss always knew just to find somebody else. He knew, I wasn't going to be the guy that they were going to be able to, fly somewhere to get a quick story. I did fly to Sydney, Australia once for a story. And it was the sort of thing that was like, this is too good to pass up. 2 weeks in Sydney. But I did have to be heavily drugged flying over. My coworker had to hold my hand on the plane. It was a long flight. I think it was probably 17 hours in a plane.
Yes.
And it was just a lot. But I did think at the time, this is sort of a trap. They're throwing a trip of a lifetime in front of me to get me on a plane, to kill me on a plane. So I took the bait and I didn't die, but I had an amazing time. But yeah, it was just tough. And then, obviously when, you're taking medication, and maybe as much medication as I was at the time to fly, I didn't really enjoy myself. And probably, I don't think I remember as much of what we did when we were there. I know that every so often somebody will bring something up and I'll think, oh yeah, that's right, we did do that. But a lot of it's really vague to me. And I feel like it's just, what wasn't the great experience that I could have had, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it does affect me. It did affect me in my work.
I love that. Hang on a second. It did affect me.
Yeah.
You changed it. You said it does affect me. It did affect me. I didn't go and notice, Brian.
Things have changed for me. Thank goodness. I'm so happy and so thankful because things have changed for me. I feel like, I am going to be able to fly now more often, and, my family will be happier. My husband, he wants to travel all over, but I've always put it off. So for the 10 years that he and I've been together, he mentions probably, I would say monthly, we should go here, we should go there. And I always have an excuse. Either I can't get off work, which I probably really could have, or we could drive, or he would like to fly to New York City and visit New York City, but I would always detour us to, a shorter drive to California or something like that.
Yeah. So you become quite inventive, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's sort of roll forward then. You had 60 days. You were going to marry your friend.
Yes.
And you've got all this sort of back history and stuff. So talk us through what you did during that 60 days and the lead up to the flight, how that went as well.
Yeah. So, like I said before, I found the podcast, and Interestingly enough, you and I had talked about this because I'm in the United States. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I found the podcast, and of course, it was from the UK. And I thought, I'm going to listen to this, but this is probably not going to be the program for me because it's from the UK. I'm in the United States. I got to find something closer to home or something that probably relates to me and my situation more. But as I got through the program more and more, I realized, hey, it's the same everywhere. Your organization's over there, the same as ours. Everybody's trying to keep everybody safe in the air. So that was really interesting. And then when I decided that I wanted to do the 30-day program, I was like, well, how am I going to pay for that? I'm in the United States, but it was easy. We paid for it, and I got the program, and the program was amazing. But so I started out with listening to the podcast, and that was the first 30 days for me. And I kind of was putting off buying the 30-day program. I was like, well, I'm going to listen to these podcasts for 30 days. And then it kept getting closer and closer. And I'm like, 30 days, I've only got 30 days left. I gotta buy this program and get those 30 days down. So the podcast was great. There were some amazing stories and amazing, information there that helped me. And then the 30-day program obviously really helped me a lot. And I was one of those binge people. I think I did the 30 days in about 15 days because I didn't want to leave too many days. I didn't want to get too close to the flight without getting cured of my fear of flying. So I think I did it in about 15 days, and then I went back and listened to things that really helped me. So while I was doing the program, I would I would write down things that really hit home for me. And I would go back and redo those things. There were certain things that just really clicked for me. And so those things I really like to listen to over and over.
What sort of things were particularly helpful?
Definitely there was something in one of the podcasts where that I told you before that sort of clicked for me, that my fear of flying was out of date. And I kept going back to that and listening to that because I remember that day that I listened to that. By the way, I probably should have told you that I naturally have anxiety, and my doctor told me once that exercise helps kind of get rid of anxiety. So I was listening to these podcasts while on a treadmill. So I was running and listening, and I was trying to just scare the fear out of me. So there was the bit about, my outdated fear of flying. And I remember the minute I realized that just really hit home for me. And so that was a part of the program that I went back to probably 4 or 5 times because I wanted to keep that embedded in my mind that, this is, your fear is just old. Your fear is, gone and over, and you need to move forward. So that, and then going over the checklist a number of times really helped. And I think I told you this before, I made some flashcards, and each flashcard had each step of the flight on it. So I think I had about maybe 38 or 39 cards, and I would flip through the cards as we were on the flight. So
that's a great idea. Actually, I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, actually, even just showing up to the airport, like, you're arriving at the airport, you might feel anxious. This is normal. You're going to go through security. And so I went through every step up with my flashcards, even to they're closing the door now. This is normal. There's sounds that are going to happen. These are normal, all of those things. And it was just really helpful to be able to sort of check those things off, right? Okay, they closed the door. Next card. Okay, they're going to start moving the aircraft, the next card. And so I just kind of followed it all the way through. So I went through that checklist quite a bit. That really helped a lot. And then the other thing that I did is I found a song that I really loved. And I know this might sound weird, but I played this song over and over for 4.5 hours because it made me feel it was an anthem song, and it made me really feel like I could do this. You know, it
Mm,
really just kind of
yeah.
gave me that pump, and so that really helped me a lot too. But you know that probably the big push for me in the end was speaking with Emma. You lined me up with a pilot coach, and she and I did a Zoom meeting, and she just hit me hard with what are the things exactly that you're afraid of on today's flight. We spoke, I think, about 8 hours before my flight,
Mm,
and we went through everything. And then she was amazing. She followed my flight online. She was texting me throughout the flight, although I don't think I got the texts until we landed. But and she saw that the flight had landed, and I got a text from her saying, congratulations,
mm.
you made it. And then on the way home, she knew the date that I was going to fly back home, and she texted me while I was at the airport that day. We went over a couple of things, and the flight home was a breeze for me. I wasn't even nervous at the airport. I wasn't nervous getting on the plane. I was a little bit nervous in the air. We had a little bit of turbulence, but the pilot was really amazing. He told me when I got on the plane, I told him I was a little bit nervous, and he said, "Well, I'll let you know the last half hour of this flight is going to be bumpy, but it's nothing that's going to damage the plane or you or anybody else. It's going to, I just want you to know that last half
Brilliant.
hour coming in is going to be bumpy." And that was really nice because I sort of relaxed for 4 hours, and then I was a
Mm,
little bit nervous for about a half hour, and it wasn't that bad, honestly. And, everybody's perception of bad turbulence is different. There was a group of, I think, 6 of us on the plane, and every time we landed, we would talk about the turbulence. And some people said, "Oh, my word, I've never had worse turbulence in my life." And I was thinking that was nothing. Like I felt like it was just little bumps and bobbles here and there. And everybody had their own opinion about what they thought that turbulence was.
and
And
that
so that was
that
really
that is a
interesting.
brilliant observation, Brian,
Yeah.
because that's exactly the thing, isn't it? That I've been on flights with people when I was running them, for the fear of flying courses, and someone that I've been sat with someone who's very anxious and that's become hyper vigilant, and they'll say, "What was that?" And I literally say, "I didn't notice anything. I
Yeah.
I didn't feel a thing." But they're so keyed into every single movement that
Yeah.
when the pilot scratches his or her nose, they notice it. It's really amazing, and I think that's a great example of it. That the funny thing is that you were thinking, "Oh, it was nothing."
Yeah. And we had one guy on our flight that was in our group who said, he was terrified. The turbulence was terrifying. And I was like, wow, like, where were you on the plane? Because where I was at, it didn't feel as bad. And then another guy who was with us said he slept through the whole thing, had no idea that there was any turbulence at all. Nothing bothering him. So I don't know. And you could tell different people throughout the plane. You could tell people that were a little bit nervous during turbulent times, and others that just really didn't care. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
interesting.
So you've made quite some significant progress.
Yeah.
Were you with your husband for that flight?
Yeah. So both flights to Miami and back. And he said it was worth the nails digging into his arm to be able to get there and back. So it was kind of interesting. We told there was a lady sitting in the third seat next to us, and I explained before the flight took off, I'm a nervous flyer, and this is my husband, and he's gonna hold my hand through the whole flight. So I just wanted to pre-warn you. If I make some grunts and groans, it's not that big of a deal. And then she said, "Well, I'm an extremely nervous flyer too." And so I said, "Oh, go through these flashcards with me when we take off and see if it works for you." She said it helped. So
Yeah. And how were you in terms of compared to when you did the flight? What were you like on that flight in terms of your actual, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being sort of where you would have been? Where were you on that one?
my first flight over, I probably would not have gotten on the plane. And I had made arrangements with a friend in our group that if I didn't get on the plane, here's my book. Here's what you say at the wedding. And here's how you get certified online the morning of, so you could be legitimate to perform this wedding for our friend. And I don't know if I would have got on the plane or not. I mean, I've gotten off planes before they took off before. But we got to the airport. I was a little bit nervous. We got on the plane. I would say, half as nervous as I would have been on any other flight on takeoff. And
Amazing.
I wasn't that bad through the flight. And so I would say, I probably 50% less. But that being a first
That's
flight in 10 years and worrying about it for 10 years. And then on the way home, it honestly was nothing for me. I felt like, that first flight kind of showed me, what it was going to be like. And I knew, that the turbulence wasn't going to kill me. It wasn't going to bring down the plane. I knew it had backup systems. I didn't freak out on the plane going over. I did worry about that a little bit. I had, you hear about people who act up on a plane nowadays, and people jump on them and hold them down. And I thought, wow, what if I have a panic attack in the plane on the way over there? And that happens to me. But it didn't. It was just, kind of my mind running away with me. And so by the second flight, I knew really exactly what to expect. I knew that I wasn't going to freak out. I knew that, we were just going to be on a plane for 4.5 hours, and it was going to be amazing. So, yeah,
yeah.
it was really interesting from flight over to flight back for sure. Even the drive to the airport on the flight back, I wasn't that nervous. Waiting in line to board the plane, I wasn't that nervous. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable, isn't it? So when I think about what you've achieved, it's phenomenal. But to break it down into logical steps, is that you've had 40 years of carrying this with lots of stuff you've had to work through. Have flown, but then heavily sedated, and you've done some trips because you literally had to. 10
Yeah.
years, you had nothing for 10 years. You've avoided it and found lots of ways to creatively get to places and say, wouldn't it be better if we drove?
Yeah.
Which, nervous flyers get really good at this. It's a skill. And then you've had a really compelling reason that you need to fly versus like a 2-day drive or whatever it is. So you've had to move towards it. You've then embarked upon the 60-day program, and even then you were kind of going, well, I can kind of put it off to the last minute to start this 30-day thing, but you've done it, binged it. Then you've got some extra help from Emma Henderson, who's captain. She used to run the EasyJet course. Did you know that? I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, the Fear of Flying course they ran. And she's giving you that sort of little extra tonic at the last minute, and then you've done it.
Yeah.
And then it reduced from the first flight to the second flight. This is just remarkable, isn't it? I mean, how do you feel about it when you think about it now? How do you feel?
Oh man, I'm just so happy that I did it. I'm happy that I sort of got put in a situation that I had to do something about it. I've been trying to do something about it for the last 10 years. And like you said, I just came up with reasons not to do it, and convinced people to ride in a car with me. And I'm just glad that I did. I'm glad that I found the program. I'm glad that it worked, and I'm glad that I followed through with it and made it happen. I was bound and determined. I didn't want to let my friend down, and I wanted to get over this so that I could move forward and enjoy my life. So when I met my husband 10 years ago, he didn't know I had a fear of flying, and we flew to Mexico, and I faked it. I got there, no big deal. It was a brand new relationship. I wasn't going to let on that there was something going on. And so we got there, and we were there for about a week, and the flight leaving was creeping up on me. And so I added a couple of more days at the resort. I was like, we're having so much fun. We should stay 3 more days, because I was trying to figure out how I was going to get myself on the plane to go home. And so 3 more days went by, and I had rebooked the flight. And when we got to the airport, I didn't realize rebooking the flight meant I was probably going to be on a different plane than we flew over on. And I was always more comfortable on something like a 737. And so we were checking in, and I don't remember what clicked, but I remember looking at the person who was checking us in and realized that we were on a smaller plane. We were on I think it was like a regional jet plane or something like that. And I had a meltdown right there in the airport. I started crying. I got online. I told them I wasn't going to be able to fly home. And somehow they convinced me, hey, you know what? All these jets are safe. They're like, it doesn't matter that it's a smaller one and you're not, it's not the 747 you'd hoped for, but this plane is just as safe as those other planes. And I got through it. I flew home, but I remember my husband realizing that there was
what
probably
else
a problem.
You told me.
Yeah. And that was the last flight 10 years ago. And then that's when I started making up all the excuses.
Well, you must be very understanding.
Yeah.
I always think
he's so happy. He's thrilled. We've already booked a couple of more vacations. We've got another flight coming up in November. We may try and take another flight earlier. My new boss, so I just got a new job. I've been in it about, I think this is my third week, and he wants to send me to a convention. And I was like, great, let's do it. But before, I would have
Who
said,
are you?
oh, I'm too busy. I don't think I can do that. So yeah, it's going to make a huge difference in my life for sure.
Yeah, because the impact is huge, isn't it? Because when I first started running fear of flying courses, I used to just think, oh well, it's just it's a nice to do, and I was wrestling with this idea, why was I doing it? But the more I've learned over the years is that the impact is like not just the person, and as horrendous as that is, it's their partners, their family, their work. It just ripples outwards, doesn't it? So and sorting it out for yourself then also has that positive ripple on everybody else, and it gives you choices. I used to say, the point of beating the fear of flying is to give yourself choices, so you can choose to fly or not to fly, but it's not because the fear is choosing for you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I was going to tell you, so it's been a few months since that last flight, and I've got this other flight coming up, and I could feel a little bit of the nerves creeping in as the date gets closer. So I had to go back and start listening to my podcast again and reviewing some of my notes and my paperwork and stuff like that. So I think it's like anything, right? It's always going to be there a little bit, and I'm always going to need maybe a little bit of a tune-up, but I don't feel like I'm terrified and that I'm not going to get on the plane. And I'm the person who actually made the reservation for the flight, where before somebody else would have had to have done that, because that just meant, that, this is a done deal.
This is commitment, isn't it? Yeah, this is brilliant.
And so I was pushing my husband, did you get your days off work? Did you get your days off work so we can, book these flights? So and prior to that, I could have cared less if he got his days off work, and hopefully he didn't. And it was too late. We weren't going to go.
It's quite a transformation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's for you nagging him saying, get the time off work. We've got to go on these flights. It's just, what a transformation.
Yeah. And it's pretty cool. My husband still went on vacation without me. So over this 10-year period of time, he and his brother would go to family reunions together. They would visit family in other states. And so they still went on with their lives, having fun and going on vacation. And I didn't get to go. So, sometimes that was tough, to be at home and feel like, I should have been there having that same amount of fun as everybody else was having. But of course I was, played it off. I was too busy, and I've got too many things going on.
Yeah, we become very good, don't we, at doing that? Yeah. Well, we don't do that another time, anytime. But
yeah.
So you've got some flights planned, which is great, which I'm really pleased, because that was one of my questions today. I was thinking, what's next? Because when people have some success like you've had, then it's like what they do next. I'm really interested to know, so you've got a
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of plans. We've sort of put an itinerary together of different trips that we're going to take. I'm hoping we probably get 4 or 5 in this year. So I don't know.
You've got some
I
catching
feel
up to
like I
do,
got
Brian.
I feel like I got to keep it going, right? I feel like if I sit on it again for another 10 years, then I gotta, it's just going to be that much harder to keep the ball rolling.
No, I totally agree. And that's important. I'm really impressed with how many you're going to get in this year. So I'm looking at the calendar thinking, well, it's what, as we record this, it's beginning of
Yeah.
September. And I think you're going to get 3 or 4 trips. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, you and I talked about one thing that I guess I didn't spend a lot of time on was just the de-icing of the planes, because I know that he's going to want to go somewhere for New Year's. He wants to go somewhere big and do something for New Year's. And I started thinking about that. Wait a minute, flying in, winter weather is probably not going to be my favorite thing, and de-icing the plane. But you and I had that conversation, I think a month or so ago. And, it made sense to me how they deal with all of that. And I'm not feeling as nervous about it, but it was sort of interesting that I didn't think about any of that while I was sort of like a fair weather flyer. But now that I feel like, I gotta move into this winter weather flying, I had to kind of think about that a little bit more. So,
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening, thinking, oh, I hadn't thought about ice on the wings. This is
yeah,
something that they learned from the 60s when we didn't know that ice and anything on top of the wing could affect the lift. Because
yeah,
although we obviously knew how lift worked, but they didn't realize that even just a little bit of snow and stuff, not snow, but ice could be a problem. So that's why
right.
that isn't a problem anymore. So there's set procedures for this, and it's well covered. Particularly, like if you fly out of New York or something like that in the winter, you've only got a set amount of time from the time you get this stuff stuck on the wings to the point where you take off. And if you don't hit that window, you've got to go back to the
Right.
terminal and they go through the whole procedure again. So I know you know this, Brian, but I'm just repeating it for everybody who's
Yeah.
listening, going,
Yeah.
but what happens? Yeah, so amazing.
So we'll see. I'm going to probably do my first winter flight here in probably the end of December. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, you already know how it's going to go.
It's going to be great.
There you go. So as we get to near the end of the podcast, I'm really grateful for you coming on and sharing your story. It's been brilliant. What's your final bit of advice or biggest tip to give anybody listening?
Man, just to go for it. Believe in yourself. Know that there's help out there. I told you that in the beginning. I kept saying this is not going to do anything. Nothing's going to change. This is it.
Yeah.
This is it for me, and it's never going to happen. But it did happen, and it made all the difference in the world for me. And I appreciate you for being the person that is there for us and putting stuff together like this for people like me to be able to get help and make the change. And I think just believing in yourself and sticking to it, and even on the days that you have setbacks where you think, okay, this is worse than I thought it was, and I'm not going to get through this. The day after or the next day, that's going to change. You'll get to another point in your process and the program, and at some point it will click and it will happen. I had days where I thought, hey, this is it. I'm good. I don't have a problem anymore. And 2 days later, I was freaking out. And I talked to you and some other people on the Facebook group, and they all said the same thing. I thought I had it under control, and then I had a bad day, but then I got it back together. And so, it's like anything. I think when you start to fight your your fears or your demons, other things creep up. But I was able to make it happen, right? I was able to push past that and know with the encouragement from other people that those things were going to happen, and I was going to, get through it,
Yeah, you
So
did. You did amazing. I mean, you did the work. That's the thing, isn't it? Because when you're fighting the fear, which is it's a term I'm sort of not quite sure where I am with that at the moment, but when you're sort of wrestling with the fear, that's maybe better. That
yeah,
it's been such a part of your life. You know,
yeah,
it's been such a strategy, and it's been almost like the auntie that no one likes, but you've got to see they're in your life, you know, and it's like that's what it's like, isn't it? You know, you've got
yeah,
this fear, and it's been around, and wish I didn't have it, but you know, what can you do? You know, and so letting
yeah,
go of that can be quite tough.
yeah. Yeah, I'm really grateful that I did it instead of just dodging it like I had been.
Oh well, Brian, that awesome, mate. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And there's lots of very inspiring messages there, and we want to hear about it in the Facebook group when you do your flight, so we can. It's just nice to know what people are up to, you know, because it just shows it helps others. And if you post a couple of pictures, I'll put you under the inspiring posts
Okay, I'll do that.
category. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I'll
what we
check
want to
in.
see.
I'll let everybody know. And once again, I really do appreciate everything you did to help me.
Pleasure. Honestly, it's an absolute pleasure. But thank you for saying that. I'll cut that bit out. Mate.
All right.
Brian,
Thanks, Paul.
thanks a million.
All right.
Brilliant.
Safe flying.